India's exporters have run into another global shipping jam. Containers that would normally move through hubs such as Colombo and Singapore are getting stuck, with some exporters reporting waits of 15 to 20 days. Why? A sudden spurt in US-China trade and the ongoing West Asia conflict. Both have forced shipping lines to redraw routes. The result? Not just longer transit times, but also volatile freight rates and bookings pushed weeks into the future. But this makes us come back to the same old question. Why does a country with a 7,500-kilometer coastline remain so vulnerable when overseas transshipment hubs get clogged? And can India's new ports finally change that? Listen on, it's Tuesday, the 11th of August. I'm Anirban Chowdhury. This is the Morning Brief. My colleagues Twesh, Mishra and Kirtika Suneja reported about this logjam on Monday. I asked Twesh to explain.
Today's story with Kirtika, we highlighted how exporters are facing some concerns since there is a lot of congestion at the ports in Colombo and Singapore. The reason why there is so much congestion is that containers are moving between the United States and China, since Chinese exporters are front-loading a lot of their exports ahead of the Christmas season over there. This is evident with the freight rates zooming up. So if we see the rate for a 40-foot container between Shanghai and Los Angeles, it is up 133% year on year to $5,894 last week. And the tariff for a container from Shanghai to New York has gone up by 106% to $7,893 for a 40-foot container. So this is an indication that trade between these two giant economies has almost skyrocketed, and the spillover effect is being witnessed with Indian exporters because we don't have as many containers available. So there is a delayed turnaround time for vessels, and Indian exporters seem to be facing a lot of issues because they're not sure when will their products reach the destination, and there have also been some instances where they're not getting the required containers to move their goods.
Got it. Now, Twesh, explain the criticality of Singapore and Colombo as transshipment ports.
So, Colombo, Singapore, these are large ports that can accommodate ultra-large container vessels or ULCVs, which require 15 to 18 meters water draft. So, they require a lot of depth where they can come and berth and allow the cargo to be offloaded. Another big issue now is at Jebel Ali, which is the port in West Asia. It is the world's largest container transshipment hub that has been offline since the Iran war began. So there's a lot of spillover effect which is coming over here as well, because containers that would rather be transshipped from there are all now supposed to move from Colombo and Singapore. That is adding more pressure over here. The problem with India right now is we don't have as many ports that can accommodate these large container vessels, and it's all a business of economy of scale where you have to have the least amount of stopping. Now, global shipping lines would rather offload their cargo at Colombo and then expect the smaller Indian companies or even their smaller counterparts to go and ensure that the cargo reaches its final destination in India, and vice versa. The smaller vessels bring export cargo from India and take it to Singapore or Colombo, where it is loaded onto a larger container vessel. So because Colombo, Singapore and Jebel Ali have traditionally been the routes where around 70 to 80% of India's transshipment cargo is handled, that is one of the reasons why it is so difficult for Indian exporters, because the congestion over there has a spillover effect over here as well.
So, Twesh, tell me, what kind of an impact does it have on logistics costs for exporters?
This broadly adds to around 10 to 15% of logistic expenses because your cargo stays at the port for longer. And the transit, there are delays of, say, around 2 to 5 days in delivery schedules. There's also an estimate that India loses around $200 to $250 million annually in port fees and bunkering charges paid to competing nations because we don't have the ports that are large enough to handle the transshipment cargo. So all of these costs build into the export competitiveness of India, and countries that have bigger ports tend to benefit from the situation.
Right. So have we already seen some impact? Are we losing export orders?
Not immediately. Exporters tend to voice their concerns before it reaches a point where we start losing orders. But going by the trends, this elevated trade between United States and China is going to ease out in a week or so, after which Indian exports should resume normalcy.
Now, okay, I got it. Now, India has a transshipment port in Vizhinjam. How long before exporters can stop depending on the Singapores and Colombos of the world?
Not immediately, because it's also, you have to understand, you look at it from the perspective of a shipping line. You will have to come towards the Indian coastline to offload and to get new cargo if you are supposed to come to Vizhinjam, whereas Colombo is already an established trade route. So Colombo and Singapore, that locational advantage will always remain. It will be an advantage for India if Vizhinjam starts operations at full scale. It's around 1 million containers, which is measured in a 20-foot equivalent unit right now. And the capacity is expected to go up to around 5.7 million containers by 2029. But even then, it won't be in a position to completely eliminate the cargo which is going to Sri Lanka or coming back from there. Another big transshipment hub which is supposed to come up will be in the Andaman Islands, the Galathea Bay project. But that is facing a lot of environment-related issues. Once Vizhinjam is operating at full capacity and Galathea Bay starts operations, a lot of our dependence on Singapore and Colombo for transshipment will reduce.
But that won't happen in the next 2 to 3 years, right?
Yeah, that's going to take at least 5 years, and Galathea Bay is going to take a lot longer because a lot of government approvals haven't yet happened. So groundbreaking is still, I see at least two more years before we can see actual groundwork happening over there. It's going to take at least 5 years for the first ship to be ready to set sail from there.
And until then, are there some near-term measures to insulate ourselves from such disruptions?
Not immediately. Government of India has been talking of a container mission. They announced it in the budget as well. Of course, having our own containers will help, but that's not going to address the immediate concern of not having a vessel coming to India or not having a port big enough to accommodate such vessels. So things are going to remain the same, and we will be very exposed to such global cues.
All right, Twesh, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, sir.
Like Twesh said, the immediate congestion will eventually ease, but the vulnerability it has exposed will remain. India wants to become a manufacturing and export powerhouse, yet its exporters can still be disrupted by a traffic jam at a foreign port. Vizhinjam and other new capacity could change that, but it will be long before India can turn its coastline into a competitive advantage. That's it for today. You were listening to this episode on The Morning Brief. It was produced by me, sound designed by Indrani Bhattacharjee. Keep following our podcasts on your favorite platforms. Stay tuned.